Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere hot, really hot, like bake your soul through your sandals hot, the kind of heat that makes your eyelashes sweat and your shadow give up. We're going deep into ancient Egypt, land of golden gods, endless sand, and architectural wonders built by very sore backs. But don't expect glamour. This isn't a history of kings and curses. This is the story of the people who hauled those stones, bled into the mortar, and still had to make it home in time for a dinner of barley mush and lukewarm beer. Before we begin, take a moment. If you truly enjoy what I do here, go ahead and tap that like button. Maybe subscribe, but only if you mean it. No pressure. We're not building pyramids here. Also, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. I love seeing where this sleepy little caravan wanders every night. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, like a distant desert breeze, and let's step together into the sand-swept misery of pyramid life, where the sun rises angry, the workday never ends, and even the gods are sweating. Welcome home. It's a modest place, and by modest I mean it looks like it was constructed by a committee of goats, blind goats. Your walls are wattle and daub, essentially sticks dipped in ancient mud and optimism, now cracked from sun, time, and maybe one too many elbows. If you press your hand against them, they feel warm. Not cozy warm. Oven walls of doom warm. And that's before the sun fully rises. The floor is packed earth, but packed is generous. It's uneven, dusty in some places, damp in others, and carries the faint scent of yesterday's sandals. There's a spot near the corner where the clay never quite dried right. You avoid it, mostly because stepping there might summon a toad or a god. Hard to say. Your roof, that's a thing of legend. Reeds, thatch, and about 17 layers of fine Nile dust. On lucky nights, it blocks out the stars. On unlucky ones, it lets them drip on your forehead, one leaky drop at a time. You've patched it 3 times with old linen and a piece of fish netting. It's holding. Sort of. Now let's talk ambience. A stray goat has claimed the doorway, like it's rent-controlled. It occasionally screams at passing spirits, or maybe it just doesn't like you. Inside, a one-legged chicken limps around like it owns the place, pecking the floor with great purpose and 0 results. And over by the cracked window ledge, there's a lizard. Small, smug, unblinking. You think it's just a lizard. Your cousin thinks it's the reincarnation of someone important. No one touches it, just in case. You live in a home made of mud, straw and prayer. Mostly prayer, and even that's running out. And just when the walls stop creaking and the goat finally stops judging you from the doorway, the cruel morning wake-up call begins. You don't wake up, you surrender. There's no gentle alarm, no bird song, no smart lamp simulating sunrise. What you do get is the screech of your overseer echoing down the road, somewhere between a goat giving birth and divine punishment in audio form. His voice cuts through the dawn air like a poorly sharpened blade, and it has one message: get up or get reassigned to the dung carts. Next door, your neighbour is already coughing, a deep, phlegmy, philosophical sort of cough, the kind that suggests he's either dying or rehearsing for the next priestly incantation. It's his 5th one this morning, and the sun's not even up. The air inside your villa is thick and motionless, but something moves. Ah, yes, the scent of camel droppings, drifting with surprising elegance through the crack in the shutter, wrapping around your face like a cursed perfume. Eau de desert beast, you try to turn over. Mistake. The heat clings to you like wet linen on a bad date. The linen, in fact, is part of the problem. You're sleeping beneath a thin rectangle of scratchy fabric, allegedly meant to protect your modesty, though it does nothing for your temperature or your sanity. It has all the insulating power of a spider web, and about the same coverage. There's no mattress, of course, just a woven mat that's seen better centuries. It's uneven, fraying, and hosts a constellation of straw poking through in all the wrong places. Your back is already mad at you, and it's only been horizontal for 6 hours. As for a pillow, don't be absurd. You've got your left forearm, or if you're feeling fancy, the folded part of your tunic. One time, you tried using your sandal, but the imprint of last week's walk to the latrine made that decision short-lived. Outside, the first rays of sun sneak over the horizon, and your clay wall instantly begins radiating heat like it holds a personal grudge. You can almost hear the bricks whispering, "Back again, are you?" You blink toward the door. The goat is still there, watching, judging. In this moment, you know two things to be absolutely true. 1. The workday hasn't started. 2. And somehow, you're already tired. You roll onto your side. Dust sticks to your cheek. Somewhere in the thatch above you, something chirps or hisses. You're not sure. You don't want to know. Then you hear it again. The screech. Louder now. Closer. That's your name in there, mangled by morning breath and bureaucratic rage. It's time. You swing your legs over the edge of the mat. The floor is cool in patches, warm in others, like the inside of an abandoned bakery. Your bones crack like dry twigs. Your mouth tastes like sand and regret. You haven't eaten. You haven't stretched. You haven't found the chicken. But the pyramid waits. And so, eventually, grudgingly, you rise. Body check, how you feel. You stand, slowly, very slowly, like an obelisk that almost doesn't want to be part of history anymore. Your joints protest with the volume of a temple choir. Knees crack, ankles wobble. Your lower back performs a quiet little betrayal that feels both ancient and personal. It's not just morning stiffness, it's pyramid stiffness. A special condition caused by lifting rocks the size of your self-worth for 12 hours straight, 6 days a week, under a sun that clearly wants you dead. Your muscles ache in places you didn't know had names. Your shoulders are screaming. Your forearms buzz with that dull post-haul fatigue. Even your fingers feel bruised from gripping ropes, tools, and perhaps your will to live. Speaking of fingers, your hands are a whole other saga. Cracked, calloused, the texture of old papyrus left in the wind too long. Under your nails? Dust, permanent dust. Not the kind you can wash off, the kind that's practically woven into your DNA now. You could scratch your arm and accidentally create a new layer of sediment. You glance down at your skin, sunburned in irregular, angry patches, dust glazed in others, like someone tried to flour you for deep frying and then gave up halfway. Your shins are especially tragic, scraped, dry, and slightly uneven in tone, like someone attempted a mural and got bored mid-calf. Your tunic, once white, now holds a rich variety of earth tones. It smells faintly of onions, salt and dried ambition. And the thirst? Oh, the thirst. Your mouth is dry, your lips feel like they've been gently sandpapered by a team of irritated scarabs. You haven't had clean water since... Well, clean water is more of an idea here, a philosophical construct, like fairness or paid overtime. You bathe with the sweat of yesterday, rinse with the Nile, and pray the crocodiles are napping. The Nile is beautiful from a distance, shimmery, majestic. Up close, it's a chaotic mixture of reeds, silt, floating fish bits, and the occasional offering someone forgot to tie down properly. You can drink from it, once, maybe twice. Then you spend 3 days speaking in riddles and regretting your optimism. Your body knows all this, and yet it still gets up, somehow. You stretch, if that's the word for what your limbs just attempted. It looks more like controlled collapse. Out the corner of your eye, you spot your neighbour doing the same thing. He moves like a cursed statue, creaking into position. You nod at each other, as if to say, "We're not dead yet. Close, but not yet." You check for new injuries, none today. Just yesterday's bruises and last week's cut that's healing like an emotional scar, slowly and with drama. You wipe your face with the back of your hand. More dust comes off than you're comfortable with. And just when you think you're ready for the day, you remember what's next. Not food, not yet. First, you have to try and make yourself slightly less horrifying to be around. Welcome to hygiene ancient Egyptian style. Now that you've risen, stretched, and reconsidered all your life choices, it's time for the morning hygiene ritual. Except there is no ritual. There is only damage control. You start with the face. It feels like sandpaper and regret. There's no soap. Soap is centuries away, along with toothbrushes and personal boundaries. What you do have is oil. Olive oil, maybe castor if you're fancy. You rub it on, gently, like a self-care influencer with a death wish. And then the blade, not for shaving, for scraping. It's called a strigil, a curved bit of bronze designed to peel off oil, sweat, and a solid percentage of your dignity. You scrape from shoulder to knee like an ancient salad. A little grit here, a little sunburn there. At some point you accept that this is probably the cleanest you'll feel today. It's less of a morning routine and more of a dusty negotiation with your own dignity. Next, the armpits. There's no deodorant. Not unless someone in your family scored a bit of natron, a salty, chalky miracle powder that doubles as body scrub, odour cover, and basic religious offering. You dab it under your arms, like you're preparing to embalm your own will to live. Now your mouth. If you still have teeth, congratulations. You're ahead of the curve. Dental care in ancient Egypt is experimental. You take a twig, some crushed mint or rock salt, and just sort of hope. Scrubbing is more of a suggestion. Spitting is optional. Swallowing is unfortunate. You finish your routine feeling gritty, which is better than sticky. You've oiled, scraped, salted, and possibly sacrificed, and you're now 2% cleaner than you were 10 minutes ago. Time to get dressed. If your tunic didn't walk away in protest overnight, it's probably still hanging by the door. The sun is fully up now. You can hear the overseer again. The goat is still watching, and you still haven't eaten. You step back inside, freshly scraped and vaguely less crusty, only to be greeted by the unmistakable sound of ancient domestic bedlam. Welcome to your household. It's not just yours, of course. You share this luxurious cube of baked mud with, well, everyone. There's your spouse, sleep-deprived and already halfway through yelling at someone. There are 3 children, probably yours, running in circles, shouting the same word over and over, like it's a sacred chant. Somewhere in the corner, 1 or 2 cousins are tangled in an argument over a missing belt, a chipped bowl, or maybe both. And then there's the elder. Every home has one. The family oracle, critic and historian rolled into one sun-dried package. They sit on the only chair, with a backrest, sipping diluted beer and loudly commenting on how everything was better under Pharaoh Sneferu. You've never met Pharaoh Sneferu, no one has. But that doesn't stop the comparisons. Someone sneezes, someone else prays. A third person is trying to wrestle a child into a tunic that clearly belongs to yesterday. Over near the door, the chicken has escaped again. It always escapes, no one knows how. The doorway is blocked by a pot, a rock, and the sleeping form of your uncle's cat. Still, the chicken is out, flapping indignantly like it pays rent. The baby is crying. Not loudly, but with persistence. You consider joining in. Breakfast is allegedly being prepared, but the only thing that smells warm is the baby, and that's not a good sign. Your spouse calls your name. It's not a request, it's a warning. You duck into a corner to look busy. Amid the clamour, the elder suddenly declares they've had a vision. No one listens, except the chicken. The chicken always listens. It's probably gathering intel. You're not sure what time it is, but you know one thing. You are very much not ready for this day. The goat bleats outside. The baby sneezes. A sandal hits your ankle. No one claims it. You close your eyes for one brief moment. Maybe this is a dream. A long, dusty, onion-scented dream. But no, this is life. And now, you hear the unmistakable clatter of a dish being set on the stone slab. A hard, round shape. Possibly edible. Possibly not. The goat bleats outside. Someone's already yelling your name. You haven't even eaten yet. And somehow, you already feel late. You shuffle across the room, or more accurately, through the chaos, toward the sacred breakfast stone, a flat slab near the wall that serves as your dining table, preparation counter, and occasional seat when someone needs to cry privately. Laid upon it is your prize, one disc of barley bread. Dense, flat, unapologetic. It's not warm. That was yesterday. Today, it has hardened into something between a building material and a warning. You pick it up. It's got weight. There are rumours this type of bread once cracked a soldier's tooth clean in half. That soldier still haunts the temple kitchens, probably. Next to it, in a lopsided cup, sloshes your morning drink, beer. Not the cold, fizzy, pop another one beer of modern dreams. This is Egyptian breakfast beer, flat, tepid, and the colour of a swamp's final regret. It's brewed from half-mashed bread crusts, wild yeast, and the kind of water that dares you to ask questions. You don't drink it for the flavour. You drink it because it won't kill you as fast as the river. Hovering above it all, one persistent fly. It's been here longer than you. This is its table now. You swat lazily miss and sigh. You'll be chewing together. No espresso, no avocado toast, just chewy grain. And hope. You tear a piece off the barley bread. It resists. There's a crack. You're not sure if it was the crust or your thumb joint. You inspect the bread. It's dry in the way the desert is dry, mummification grade. You try dunking it in the beer. It softens slightly, in the same way stone erodes over centuries. You chew more. You begin questioning your life. Your neighbour's already halfway through his meal, staring blankly at the wall like a man who's accepted his fate. The baby is being spoon-fed a slurry of mashed lentils and futility. The goat sticks its head in, eyes the bread, and decides it has standards. You take another bite. It doesn't get better. There's a hint of charred grain, a sprinkle of sand, and something nutty you really hope is just sesame. The elder mutters, "Best bread in months." You believe him, and that makes it worse. You glance out the door. The sun is higher now. The heat's creeping in like it paid rent. Somewhere down the road, the overseer is barking again. Names, orders, vague curses. The day has started without you, and you've got approximately 1/3 of a rock-hard puck left to consume. You switch strategies, bigger bites, less chewing, regret it instantly. Your spouse offers you a sliver of onion. It's sharp, wet, and the best thing you've tasted since last flood season. You savour it like royalty. For 5 seconds, then it's gone. The beer is now warm. It wasn't cold to begin with, but now it's managed to reach the exact temperature of your disappointment. You drink it anyway. The fly joins you. You pretend not to notice. Outside, a wheel creaks, wooden sled on limestone. Someone's already dragging the first block of the day. You finish your meal, more of an armistice than a meal, and wipe your hands on your tunic, which is only marginally cleaner than the floor. Your stomach isn't full. It's not even satisfied, but it's quiet, and that's something. You've eaten, technically, and that means there's no excuse left. The pyramid calls. You step into your sandals, grab your worn linen cap, and look up into a sky so bright it feels personal. This isn't breakfast, this is prelude. To the labour, to the sun, to the hauling of 1,000 regrets across 1,000 cubits of pain. But for now, you've survived the disc of sorrows, and that's no small thing. You wipe the last crumb of barley from your mouth, take a long, final sip of what might generously be called beer, and brace yourself. It's time. You reach for your gear, if it can be called that. A linen head wrap, once white, now somewhere between beige and surrender. A belt made of plaited fibre, more ceremonial than functional, and tucked into it, a dull bronze dagger, mostly for cutting rope, possibly for cutting lunch, probably not for protection. You'd need something sharper than regret for that. Your spouse gives you a look. Not quite affectionate, not quite annoyed, just tired. The children are already wrestling over who gets the not-broken bowl today. The elder lifts a hand in a vague gesture, either farewell or a warning about the movement of the stars. You step outside. The goat doesn't move. The chicken, for once, does not escape. An omen? You don't want to know. You mutter a quiet goodbye, not because you're sentimental, because you're genuinely not sure if this is the day a limestone slab finally finds your spine. Then you begin the walk. It's not a commute, it's a slow, dusty pilgrimage to your personal version of purgatory. You join the stream of other workers, all heading the same direction, all wearing the same tunics, the same blank expressions, the same thin film of flour, sweat and anxiety. No one speaks, not out of discipline, just preservation. Talking wastes breath, and you'll need that to yell in pain later. Ahead, heat. Behind, dust. Beside you, a man limps slightly. You don't ask why, you already know the answer. The pyramid waits, and it's not getting any smaller. The path to the worksite isn't marked, but everyone knows the way. You follow the footprints of yesterday's misery, still visible in the hard-packed dirt, still warm somehow. The sun has barely cleared the horizon, and it's already searing. It doesn't rise, it launches like a personal insult from the gods. It lands directly on your forehead, pressing down with the weight of divine judgment and atmospheric spite. There's no wind. There never is. Wind is a luxury reserved for temples and stories. Out here, the air sits still, thick, heavy, and slightly hostile. Every breath tastes of sand and someone else's sweat. You consider breathing less, just to conserve effort. Around you, a small river of humanity flows in grim silence. Dozens of men, some young, most not, moving in the same rhythm. Heads down, shoulders forward, feet dragging in time with despair. No one speaks, no one jokes. Words are for people with extra energy. No one here has any. Each step kicks up dust. It clings to your legs, your tunic, your teeth. Your sandals, if you're lucky enough to have them, are worn thin, flapping softly against the baked earth. The straps dig into your skin, now damp with heat, now dry again. It's a cycle, like death and taxes, but with more blisters. Some walk barefoot. You envy their bravery. You pity their souls. The path is uneven, scattered with sharp stones, cow droppings, and the occasional flattened scarab, holy once, now roadkill. You sidestep a pile of donkey bones someone never got around to cleaning up. There's a smell. Of course there is. You glance to your left. A man is limping, his ankles wrapped in old linen. His eyes say what none of you will. I might not make it to the halfway mark. You nod. That's the only encouragement you've got. Occasionally, someone stumbles. No one offers a hand. There are no breaks on this road, no benches, no shade, just endless sand, sweat, and the slow realization that this is still the easiest part of your day. The pyramid is still out of sight, but you know it's there, waiting, looming like a passive-aggressive relative who never says anything but always judges. You wipe your forehead. It doesn't help. The sweat is instant, returning before your hand leaves your face. And now, you hear it. A low rumble in the distance, the sound of wood scraping stone, of ropes creaking, of men shouting over one another. You've reached the site, and suddenly, as your foot steps over the ridge of the final dune, it's all laid bare before you. The dust, the ropes, the blocks, the rising walls of eternal legacy and temporary suffering. Welcome to the pyramid. You crest the final rise, and there it is, the pyramid. Still there, still growing, still demanding. Its base sprawls wider than most villages, and its sides reach higher than your ambition ever did. Stone upon stone, tier upon tier, stacked by hands like yours, and knees like yours, now trembling slightly from the walk. And suddenly you're in it. The sight, the chaos, the noise, the air hits you first, hot, thick, and alive, with the kind of scent cocktail that only extreme effort can produce. Sweat, sand, linseed oil, and somewhere underneath it all, the unmistakable reek of sun-cured fish. It clings to your nostrils. You try breathing through your mouth. Bad idea. It tastes worse. Around you, the day is already in full roar. A foreman is shouting from a scaffold. Your name, someone else's name, a word that might be a curse or just his breakfast coming back up. The tone is clear. Urgency, thinly veiled panic, and possibly heat stroke. To your right, workers are hammering wooden stakes into the earth to brace sled paths. The stakes split with dry cracks, echoing off stone like ancient firecrackers. To your left, a stone block, larger than your bed, heavier than your will, is being dragged uphill by a crew of 10 men and one very nervous goat. You watch it move, inch by groaning inch. The ropes creak like the gods themselves are stretching. Dust clouds rise behind it like a judgment. There's rhythm to the madness. A call and response chant from the haulers. Heave! Heave! Help! Laughter follows. A little, then silence again. Then more shouting. You step carefully. The ground here is a strange mixture of trampled footprints, splintered wood, greasy patches of spilled oil, and what you're 70% sure is fermented fish guts. One wrong step, and you're either sliding into a wall or gaining a limp that'll last longer than the dynasty. A foreman walks past, carrying a clay tablet and barking into the wind. He bumps your shoulder without looking. You say nothing. You just lower your eyes, find your mark and wait for instruction. You're assigned to block Team 4, moving one of the base cornerstones. It's a good spot. Flat. Fewer chances of falling, but still hot, heavy, and entirely unforgiving. You glance upward. The pyramid seems taller than yesterday. You? Somehow smaller. Your hands already itch. Your back whispers threats. Your sandals groan. It's organized chaos, if by organized you mean complete, daily panic held together by shouting and sandals. Someone drops a chisel. It bounces twice, then vanishes between two slabs. You hear a quiet prayer. Then more shouting. You haven't even started working yet. And already, you're tired all over again. The foreman waves you forward. No speech, no warm-up, no ceremony. Just a grunt, a finger, and a vague gesture towards something very large and very solid. Your stone. It's not a metaphor. It's an actual 2.5-ton block of limestone, sun-bleached and square, sitting there like it owns the desert. Which in a way it does. It has no wheels, no levers, no blessed miracle, just rope made from papyrus and sheer audacity, wrapped around its bulk like a tug-of-war against physics itself. You join your crew, 14 men, all dust-coloured and posture-damaged. No one introduces themselves. You've all met in the sweat of days past. You take your place near the rear rope, where the tension bites hardest and the rope burns fastest. Someone spits. Someone else mumbles a prayer. Then it begins. Heave! The stone shudders. Heave! It shifts. Help? That one wasn't in the chant. That was someone actually asking. You dig your heels into the packed sand, lean back, and pull with everything you've got. The rope slices into your palms. Your arms tremble, your shoulder screams, and the block moves maybe 5 inches. There's cheering. You're not sure why. The rhythm continues. Heave, drag, gasp, repeat. You find yourself caught in a loop of pain and grit, synchronized with 14 strangers whose groans now match your own. Your shoulders cook under the sun, the fabric of your tunic sticking, then peeling, then sticking again. Your hands are raw, blistered under yesterday's blisters. Your head throbs with the kind of pulsing ache that no amount of papyrus tea or divine intervention could fix. The stone catches on a ridge. Everyone jerks forward. The rope snaps taut. Someone swears. Someone else falls. You look back. A man has slipped, his foot caught in the dust and the slick smear of someone else's spilled oil. He goes down hard. The block lurches toward him. For a breathless moment, it feels like time pauses. Then, hands grab, body strain, rope stretches, and the block stops, just short. Dust settles. No one speaks. He gets up, limping. Doesn't complain. Just nods once, repositions his grip and pulls. Because that's what you do here. There are no rest breaks, no safety drills, no medals, only the silent agreement that if a stone crushes you, someone else will finish your shift. And maybe if you're lucky, pour beer on the ground in your name. You lose track of time. The sun is above now, direct, absolute, merciless. You blink sweat from your eyes and taste copper in your mouth. Still, the work doesn't stop. Block after block. Pull, reset, pull again. At one point, you notice the rope is smoking. Not fire, just friction. It smells like burnt grass and failure. You keep pulling. Nearby, another team sings a chant in 3 parts. It's rhythmic, hypnotic, oddly beautiful. Then it ends abruptly when someone vomits mid-verse. You look down. Your feet are filthy, bleeding in one spot, and you don't remember when the sandal broke. The stone moves another few cubits. You want to cheer, but it takes too much energy. You settle for breathing, and that's the job. No applause, no shade, just sweat, dust, and the knowledge that when you wake up tomorrow, your arms will ache like they were replaced with wet rope, and you'll do it all again. Because stones don't move themselves, and pyramids don't care who bleeds beneath them. You'd think the ground, of all things, would be the least of your problems. But no, the ground has opinions. It shifts under you with every step, soft where it should be solid, rock hard where it should yield, and tilted just enough to make gravity feel like a personal vendetta. The slope climbs sharply toward the rising base of the pyramid, and as the stone gets heavier, the earth gets trickier. You lose footing often. Sometimes it's the dust, fine, dry, and deceptively slippery. Other times, it's the gravel, sharp chunks of broken rock tossed carelessly from yesterday's chisel work, now hiding in the dirt like little knives with ambition. And then there's the real hazards, the organic matter, dung, everywhere, from oxen, from donkeys, from creatures you'd rather not name, trampled into the soil, dried into brittle husks, sometimes still disturbingly warm. It coats your sandals, your toes, the bottom of your tunic. You stop noticing the smell sometime after your third face-first encounter, and if the dung doesn't get you, the fish bones might. Yes, fish bones, sharp little spines scattered across the worksite like some forgotten curse. No one knows why they're here, left over from worker rations, ritual offering, bored priest with a bucket of scraps. Whatever the reason, they wait in silence, ready to pierce your heel when you least expect it. You slip. You go down. Elbow first, then knee, then dignity. No one helps, not because they're cruel, but because they're busy trying not to fall themselves. You push yourself up. Brush off the dust. Ignore the blood. Keep moving. That's the rule. Always forward. Always up. Occasionally, a drumbeat sounds in the distance, not the chant of work, but the deeper thrum of ritual. Somewhere, not far from the site, there's a ceremonial platform, a raised slab of stone where the priests conduct offerings to the gods of stone and sky. You catch a glimpse as you pass, a white cloth, a flicker of flame, and something being sacrificed, possibly an ox, possibly something smaller. You don't look too closely. You're not sure if the sacrifice is to bless the pyramid or ward off another worker accident. Either way, you keep your head down. It's not your business. Not today. A gust of wind kicks up dust. For a second, you can't see your feet. You feel another sharp jab in your heel. Stone or spine, who knows? You keep walking. Because the ground may hate you, but the pyramid doesn't care. If the pyramid is the great ambition of the empire, the foreman is the voice of its impatience. He stands just far enough to avoid dust, just close enough to yell with maximum efficiency. His voice cuts through the chaos like a reed whip through a bad attitude. Faster! The pharaoh waits for no man. A pause, then the punchline. Except the embalmer. You've heard it every day for 3 weeks. It stopped being funny after day 2. You're not sure it was ever funny. But he laughs at it, and that's what matters. He carries a clay tablet, scratched with columns and symbols, tallies of pulls, names of workers, maybe curses in shorthand. You've seen your name on it once. You're not sure what that meant. No one ever explains. His job is to count your heaves, time your rests, and scream whenever your posture suggests survival. Occasionally, he slaps the wooden frame of the scaffolding or smacks the ground with a stick. You don't flinch anymore. Fear is a luxury for people with energy. Some foremen carry actual whips. Yours prefers threats and poetry. He once shouted, "Build as if Osiris himself will inspect your joints." You didn't know if he meant the stonework or your knees. Motivation, in this place, comes in creative forms. Sometimes, if you pull fast and don't die, You earn a reward. A slice of dried onion, still pungent and slightly sandy. Or, if the gods are generous, a short break in the shade, under a stretched cloth that smells like 10 other men, and at least one dead fish. You sit for 5 minutes, watching a fly land on your arm. You don't swat it. The fly has earned its place, so have you. One man once received a date, a single shriveled fruit for finishing his block early. He wept as he ate it. No one mocked him. You all understood. Some days there's beer, thin, warm, and served in a reused clay cup. It tastes like regret and leaves you slightly dizzy, which, to be fair, makes pulling stone more tolerable. But more often than not, motivation comes from a different source. You look to your left and see a man twice your age, still hauling. You look to your right and see a boy not yet grown, coughing from the dust. You see the pyramid rising and know that whether or not you pull today, it will keep rising. And so you do. Not for onion, not for beer, but because stopping feels worse than moving, and because the foreman is still watching. By now the sun is directly overhead, hanging in the sky like a glowing accusation. You've pulled 12 blocks, lost 1 sandal, and picked up 3 dead fish with your bare hands. Gifts from yesterday's ill-fated lunch cart, now integrated into the pyramid supply chain. Somehow, your arms are jelly. Your back feels like it's been cursed by 3 different gods. Your tunic clings in all the wrong places. You pause for a moment, not long enough to be scolded, just long enough to wonder what day it is, what year it is, and whether you've actually aged 10 seasons since sunrise. You glance upward. The pyramid still looms. The tier you're supposed to finish today, still unfinished. The blocks you thought you moved so far, barely a dent in the horizon. You glance downward. A fresh blister has appeared on your heel. Round, red, slightly squishy, like a baby beat with attitude. You wiggle your toes in protest. They don't respond. Someone nearby groans. Another man drops his rope and sits, breathing like he just wrestled Anubis. You join him, just for a breath, just for the illusion of a pause. All around you, the sight is slowing. Movements become sluggish. Chants turn into mumbles. Even the foreman's voice cracks a little. The heat is relentless, but there's something worse. Hunger. Your stomach grumbles, a dry, empty rattle. A warning. You check the sun's angle. You know what's next. The one moment of mercy carved into your day. Not salvation exactly, but something close. Lunch. Just as your legs begin to wobble and your stomach begins to plot rebellion, you spot him, the other kind of foreman. Not the one who shouts. This one documents. He doesn't carry a whip. He carries a clay tablet, freshly etched and drying in the sun, like a cake of bureaucracy. In one hand, a reed stylus. In the other, judgment, thinly veiled behind a permanent expression of mild disappointment. He walks slowly, precisely, never sweating. Somehow, his linen robe remains clean, a feat that borders on sorcery. He doesn't bark orders. He doesn't need to. He just watches, eyes narrowing each time someone lifts with their back or wipes sweat with the wrong sleeve. He doesn't yell. He documents. And somehow, that's worse. He's not here to motivate. He's here to record who pulled how many blocks, who fell behind, who took an extra sip of beer at last break. He's the ancient Egyptian version of middle management. A human spreadsheet with sandals. The rough foreman might break your spirit. This one will bury it under administrative oversight, wrapped in string, sealed in red ink, and filed under reassigned to tomb crew. And you know, just by the way he glances at your sandals, that he's already made a note about that missing one. You'd think hauling stones was the hard part. Turns out being measured while doing it is worse. The man with the clay tablet isn't just watching, he's recording. Every heave, every pause, every suspiciously long trip to the water jar. He's got a roster carved in rows of tiny hieroglyphs, little owls, sticks, and squiggles that somehow translate into pulled 5 blocks, slipped twice, fell into fish remains once again. Your name is there, misshapen, crammed into the margin, probably next to a drawing of a disappointed crocodile. Then there's the other tablet, what he calls the ration sheet. You'd like to think of it as a payroll, but instead of coins, it lists who gets a handful of lentils, half an onion, one ladle of beer that tastes like ancient regret. It's not pay, it's performance-based nutrition. And the worst part, it's all permanent. The tablets are sun-dried clay, no erasing, no edits. If he miscounts or writes your name under absent because you happen to faint behind a block, well, that's the record, forever. No appeals, no HR department, just you, your underfed stomach, and your reputation carved in mud. If he drops the tablet, shatters it, then poof, your morning doesn't exist, and neither does your beer. There's no backup system, no second copy, just the foreman's memory, which is as sharp and forgiving as a granite wall. On the surface, it all looks reasonable. There are tallies, there are rosters, there are tablets etched with your name and tiny tick marks that allegedly mean something. To an outsider, it might even seem fair. A well-run operation. Performance-based, merit-driven, sensible. But from where you're standing, ankle-deep in dust and 3 blocks behind quota, none of it makes any sense. No one knows how the foreman calculates efficiency. It might involve blocks moved, or time taken, or how favourably you squinted at him during morning check-in. Because here's what you do know. The day you pulled 10 stones faster than anyone else, you were rewarded by being assigned 12 the next day. No beer bonus, no onion sliver, just a heavier load and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. You learned quickly. Do too little, you're lazy. Do too much, you're suddenly the strong one. But heaven forbid you complain. Say one thing, just one little comment about your shoulder being dislocated or your soul leaking out through your sandals, and your name ends up with a new annotation on the tablet. Then come the reassignment days, a whisper in the wind, a tap on the shoulder, and suddenly you're no longer Block Crew 4. You're now Tomb Excavation Support, Team B. What's that mean? It means you spend your day hauling jars of resin, sweeping cursed corners, and brushing hieroglyphs off coffin lids using goat bone toothbrushes. The air is thicker there, less dust, more funeral funk. Flies circle everything like they own the place, and some of the residents look like they'd rather be left alone. Complain once, and suddenly you're brushing tomb walls with goat bones while chanting apologies to Osiris. Everyone knows the rule: suffer in silence or get reassigned into something worse. So you smile, you nod, you pull your blocks at a pace that's not too fast, not too slow, just adequate, because in a world carved from stone and guesswork, adequacy is the only real protection you've got. Now, they'll tell you the system is rotational, that everyone gets a turn at different tasks, some days hauling, some days lifting, some days blessedly stacking bricks in the shade. And technically, that's true, but in practice, unless you're cousins with the scribe, your rotation is more like a permanent appointment, with gravity, sunstroke, and chronic lower back issues. You notice the same faces always end up on shade detail, always seem to get the lighter loads, always seem to leave early with fewer bruises and a full onion in their pouch. Coincidence? The clay tablets don't record coincidence. Then comes week's end, the so-called internal review. On that glorious day, the scribe gathers the week's tallies, scratches his chin, and announces who hit the required quota of stone, and who, apparently, did not. No public shaming, just consequences. Miss your block count by 1? No beer for you, no onion, just the sting of dry barley and the taste of personal failure. Some unlucky souls are even given the role of motivation caller. It sounds noble, it isn't. You walk alongside the team shouting the work chants in time. Heave, heave, ho, heave, heave, hold. If your rhythm slips, if your voice cracks, if someone trips during your verse, you're accused of disrupting divine harmony. The last guy who got it wrong was temporarily reassigned to dung cart duty. No one asked questions. The flies had already answered them. So when they offer you rotational opportunity, you smile politely. And quietly, pray your name stays under the hauling column. Because predictably awful is still better than unpredictably cursed. At some point, maybe while hauling your 15th block or watching a goat eat someone's ration list, you realize a strange truth. It doesn't matter how well you work or how many blisters you earn. There's always someone writing it down, sometimes for the sake of records, sometimes for the sake of punishment, and sometimes just because the scribe is bored and needs to practice drawing jackals. You could build perfectly straight, lift with perfect form, move like a graceful, dust-covered gazelle, and still, your name might show up on the wrong tablet, next to a squiggle that means lazy, or inefficient, or suspected goat sympathizer. That's the real power of ancient Egyptian bureaucracy. It's not fast, it's not fair, but it is thorough. There are layers of oversight thicker than pyramid walls, systems that move slower than stone, and punishment methods so creative they border on performance art. One man was once demoted for staring at a fish too long, another for chanting offbeat during sacred hauling. You don't make the rules, you just survive them, and you begin to suspect. The reason these pyramids have lasted 4,000 years isn't just the engineers, or the craftsmanship, or the divine inspiration. It's because no one dared misfile a block count. Somewhere, etched in clay and sun-dried to permanence, is a logbook of every pull, every slip, every sigh. And every time someone thinks about slacking off, they remember. The gods may forgive, but the scribe, he never forgets. By the time the sun's directly overhead and the shadows have vanished like your enthusiasm, the foreman raises one hand. Not in kindness, but in obligation. Lunch break. You step back, drop the rope from your raw, dust-glazed hands, and stagger toward what little shade the job site has to offer. It's not much, just a patch of frayed linen cloth strung between two half-buried scaffolds, sagging under the weight of heat and history. You claim a corner. It's already half occupied by a dog, some kind of ancient stray with more ribs than fur, and two stone haulers, one with a blind eye, the other with a cough that sounds older than the pyramid itself. No one speaks. Not out of politeness, but because you're all busy chewing silence. A boy walks past with a clay jug and a basket. From it, he distributes your midday reward: bread, beer, and that's it. No olives, no dates, no fig drizzled with honey under the golden eye of Ra. Just another puck of barley harder than your optimism, and lukewarm beer the colour of indecision. The bread crumbles like sandstone, dry, crumbly, coated in a fine film of dust that you've stopped trying to brush off. You don't dip it in beer for flavour, you dip it for structural safety. Dry bread plus dry throat equals workplace hazard. You take a bite, you chew, and chew, and chew. It never quite becomes food. Just a mass of existential grit slowly breaking down under molar pressure and silent prayer. The beer goes down faster, not because it's good, but because it doesn't require chewing, and because hydration is now an act of survival. You sip. It's flat, vaguely sour. There's something floating in it. You don't look too closely. You glance around. The dog is staring at your bread with the weary patience of a creature that knows how this goes. You break off a corner. Toss it. It lands in the dirt. The dog sniffs, licks it once, then walks away. Even the stray has standards. One of the stone haulers coughs again. No one flinches. At this point, coughing is part of the landscape, like sand or shouting, or the feeling of futility clinging to your soul like a damp tunic. Above you, the pyramid looms. It doesn't break for lunch. It just stands there, absorbing the sun like it's trying to cook you faster. You lean back against a pile of tools, mostly broken things that someone insists still have a few pulls left in them. A chisel, a cracked lever, a man who fell asleep mid-bite. Around you, others do the same. Everyone in their own patch of shade, if they're lucky. If not, they eat in the open, squinting against the glare, chewing as slowly as possible to prolong the illusion of rest. This isn't relaxation. It's scheduled collapse, A time to pretend your spine doesn't ache, your blisters aren't bleeding, and your soul isn't halfway across the Nile trying to find a new host. And yet, somehow, this is the best part of your day. Happiness isn't a condition, it's a strategy. You don't laugh, that would take too much effort. But you do smile, slightly, because for 10, maybe 12 minutes, no one is pulling, no one is yelling, and the dog is gone. Then somewhere in the distance, a voice, the foreman, calling names, tapping tablets. Lunch is over. You rise slowly, knees first, then spine, then soul. Brush off the crumbs, tighten your belt, check your sandals, and return to the slope, to the stone, to the dream that maybe, just maybe, the sun will get bored and set early. But probably not. From a distance, the pyramid is perfect. Its angles are sharp, its stones seamless. It rises from the sand like the gods carved it there, with their own hands. It gleams in the sun, immovable, eternal, unfathomable, a wonder of the world. But up close, it's not quiet, it's not clean, and it's not kind. There's dust caked into every crevice, scars on the limestone where tools slipped, bloodstains where hands got crushed. And somewhere, under all that grandeur, are the ones who didn't make it out. We remember the pyramid. We forget the people beneath it. We call it legacy. But for thousands of men, it was just another shift under the sun. Another chance to trip, slip, or fall beneath a moving slab of history. No statues were made in their honour. No scrolls recorded their names. They existed between pulls, between tally marks and ration jugs, and then suddenly didn't. And yet we call it glorious. We marvel at the stones, never asking who didn't get back up after lifting them. It's easy to praise a structure that stands for 4,000 years. Harder to count how many backs broke making it happen. And when the sun hits just right, the pyramid still gleams. But it doesn't reflect you. It reflects a story someone else polished, long after the workers were gone. And now, as you sit chewing your noon bread beside the stone you're meant to lift next, you start to understand something. The pyramid didn't build itself, but it won't remember you either. And the thing is, it wasn't a surprise. No one expected to survive the pyramid. Not really, because death wasn't an accident here. It was part of the process, like rope, like sweat, like sand in your teeth. No matter how strong your arms, or steady your footing, or faithful your morning prayer, something always went wrong. A stone block comes loose, and it doesn't just stop. It rolls, crashes, shatters the plank beneath your friend's feet, and keeps moving like gravity's personal revenge. A rope phrase worn down by heat and use, and snaps mid-haul, sending the weight down, or backward, or sideways, into whatever unfortunate soul was still catching their breath. And scaffolding? They were built fast, rebuilt daily, roped together with dry fibre and well-meaning urgency. One wrong step, and your morning becomes a drop through silence and dust, and then nothing. But the worst was quieter. The heat. It crept in through your pores, into your lungs, behind your eyes. You didn't fall, you faded. Your mouth went dry, your vision shimmered, your steps slowed, and suddenly you were sitting down and not standing back up. The others didn't stop, couldn't stop. The work went on. Always, someone would drag the body to the side, cover it with a mat, maybe say a name, maybe not. And then they'd lift the rope again. Pause too long and you'll be replaced faster than the rope phrase. And it wasn't cruel. Not exactly. It was necessary. There were quotas. There were sunlit hours to use. There were block counts recorded by a scribe with no interest in mourning. There were always more men. Always someone else willing to take up the slack. A boy whose brother didn't come home yesterday. A cousin just arrived from the village. A stranger who heard there was beer and bread and didn't ask too many questions. They say the pyramids were built to last forever. And maybe they were. But the people who built them, they were made of flesh. Software fragile, replaceable, and they were treated like it. You don't see their names in textbooks. You don't hear them in lectures. You just see the stones, stacked and perfect, never stained, never cracked, never whispering how many bones lay beneath them. But the men who worked knew. Every pulled rope was a gamble. Every shift was a coin toss between dinner and being buried under the thing you helped create. And when someone didn't show up the next day, no one asked, because the answer was always the same. Of course, the legends say it differently. They whisper of men sealed inside the pyramid as guardians or as sacred offerings, laid to rest with golden tools and solemn chants to protect the king's journey through the afterlife. It's a poetic idea, dramatic, neatly symmetrical, with the grandeur of the stones above. But the truth? It's rarely that glamorous. Most of the men buried inside weren't placed there by design. They were trapped, caught in a collapse, crushed by a block that moved 1 inch too far. Or entombed mid-corridor when someone somewhere miscalculated how much support a wooden beam could offer after 3 months of direct sun. They didn't get gold, or prayers, or songs carved into the walls. They got silence, dust, and the slow, indifferent weight of limestone settling into permanence. Sometimes, if they were lucky, the crew noticed the collapse, dragged out the body, covered it, said a few words, but sometimes the block just stayed, and so did they. A man disappears, and no one asks too loudly, because the schedule doesn't allow for grief, and the scribe doesn't like revising rosters. So the crew moves on, shifts their path around the fallen stone, adds another chant to the hauling rhythm, and pulls. Later, someone carves a warning nearby, not a eulogy, a lesson. On one section of wall, deep inside a lesser corridor, there's a series of glyphs, not names, not poetry, just a list of symbols. Foot here, man fell, stay left. That was the memorial, a cautionary tale in sandstone. In some pyramids, there are entire shafts left unfinished, closed off abruptly where construction changed plans midstream. Historians debate secret rooms, hidden traps, but those who worked here knew better. Sometimes a tunnel ends because it was supposed to. Sometimes it ends because someone died there, and no one wanted to finish it anymore. And the body? Well, burying them elsewhere would have taken time. Better to roll another slab in, seal the corner, let the wall forget them. There are even stories, passed quietly, told by men over warm beer in the shade, of a worker who died wedged between 2 blocks. Too difficult to retrieve, so they carved his outline into the stone, smoothed it, left it there, not a tribute, just closure. That's how the pyramid remembers you, not by name, not by honour, but by absence, by the hollow your body made before the stone cooled, by the mistake your foot took that someone else learned not to repeat. The outside world thinks those buried in the pyramid were chosen, special, holy, trusted, but in truth, they were just unlucky, in the wrong place, under the wrong block, at the wrong time. And eternity simply had no time to move them. Of course, in the centuries that followed, people would look back at the pyramid and see mystery. A sealed shaft halfway up the structure, clearly a sacred passage to the afterlife. A doorless room with no known purpose. Must be a chamber for rituals, or secret knowledge, or alien telepathy. A tunnel that leads nowhere and stops abruptly in the middle of the wall. That's a hidden code, a cosmic alignment, proof of divine intervention. But if you ask the workers, they'd probably tell you the truth. Ah, that room. Yeah, someone put the plans in upside down. That tunnel? The crew quit. The foreman fell into it. We just sealed it off. That stone passage ran out of rope. Nobody wanted to go back, because most of the secrets inside the pyramid aren't mystical. They're mundane. They're the architectural equivalent of "we'll fix it later," followed by never doing so. A wall built at the wrong angle, a hallway carved too far to the left, a chamber that no one needed after the royal burial plans changed, but still existed, so they just slapped a slab on it and moved on. In the modern world, we call that Project Drift. In ancient Egypt, they called it Tuesday. And those sacred ventilation shafts? Some might have started as just escape routes for workers, or side tunnels to deliver beer barrels, or shortcuts that turned into dead ends when someone said, "Wait, that's not north." The irony is, the more chaotic the planning became, the more fascinating the final result appears to us now. What we interpret as intentional was often just the result of haste, heat, and a crew trying to get home before the beer spoiled. Sometimes the greatest mysteries of the ancients were just someone's very old mistake, now entombed forever in limestone. And that's the funny thing about monuments. We assume they were carved from genius, guided by stars, touched by the gods. But more often than not, they're just giant piles of decisions, some wise, some lazy, some accidental, stacked on top of each other until no one can tell the difference. We call it glory, but if you chipped away the smooth facade, you'd probably find a half-finished corridor, a misplaced block, and a very old note that reads, "This wasn't supposed to be here." But now it is, and so it stays. Just like the men who built it, forgotten, but still holding everything up. We call them wonders now, stone miracles, testaments to vision, endurance, and celestial ambition. The pyramids, symbols of divine order, eternal rest, and the pharaoh's journey to the stars. The ancients called them something else: glory, immortality, order carved into chaos. But for the men who pulled the ropes, hauled the blocks, and bled into the sand with every footstep, it wasn't glory, it was a job. A brutal, blistering, sun-scoured job, with little reward and no margin for failure. Immortality was for the kings. For everyone else there was dust and duty, and the quiet hope that your rope wouldn't snap before midday. To the scribes and priests, the pyramid stood for eternal perfection. To the labourers, it stood for calloused hands, missed meals, and the ever-present threat of being crushed by ambition, both literal and architectural. They called it eternity. We called it Thursday. Because for all the poetic ink spilled about the sacred geometry of the gods, the truth was simpler. Thousands of human beings gave their bodies to something that would never speak their names. Some of them died beneath falling stones. Some were buried in walls no one planned to finish. Some simply collapsed, were moved aside, and replaced before the sweat on the rope had dried. And centuries later, we admire the symmetry. But we never ask who held it up. That's the strange, uneasy beauty of legacy. It erases fingerprints, cleans the blood, polishes over the names until all that remains is the illusion of divine construction. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the pyramid was never meant to remember the hands that shaped it, only the silence that came after. Because in the end, we don't read the names of the workers. We don't carve their stories into textbooks. We don't sing their songs. We just measure their alignment, praise the precision, marvel at how something so perfect could have come from human hands, while forgetting the humans attached to them. They died building eternity, and eternity didn't even carve their names. But maybe, in the dust that settles between the stones, in the cracks where handprints once pressed, and in the silence between chants long faded, they're still there, not remembered, but felt. The sun is slipping behind the dunes now, finally deciding to give up, long after you did. The sky glows in dusty orange and fading gold, but no one's looking up. Your feet hurt too much. Your shoulders feel like they've been pressed into stone themselves. And the air, still warm, not scorching anymore, just oven set to warm. Enough to remind you that Earth hasn't forgotten what happened today. The path home isn't long, but it drags. Every step is quiet, not out of reverence, but exhaustion. No one talks. There are no jokes, no chants, just the soft shuffling of sandals and the occasional grunt when someone stumbles on a loose rock they forgot was always there. Some carry tools, others carry nothing but dust and bruises. One man is holding his side like he's afraid it might come loose. Another has a limp that wasn't there this morning. No one asks questions, because no one wants to know the answers. It's not a triumphant march, it's survival, heading back to base camp for another round tomorrow. And still, somehow, it's not bleak, just quiet, a kind of peace that only comes after everything has been spent. You're not celebrating, you're simply making your way back, to where the pain stops being public and turns into something softer, something personal, the kind you sleep on and wake up with. Eventually, the path veers toward the river. You don't discuss it, you just follow the curve like always, a quiet procession of sore feet and silent intentions toward the one place that might offer something close to relief. The Nile at dusk is calm, wide, muddy, cool in a way that feels suspicious, like it knows what you've been through, but isn't quite ready to forgive. You crouch at the bank, not gracefully, more like a tree giving up mid-fall. The water smells like everything: silt, fish, heat, and whatever the oxen left behind upstream. But you cup your hands anyway. You rinse your face, then your arms, then whatever still qualifies as feet, though after today they feel more like gravel-filled memories. There's no soap, no scented oils, just water, your hands, and the hope that whatever just brushed your ankle was a friendly fish and not divine retribution. This isn't cleansing. This is just trying to feel slightly less like an overheated brick. Someone beside you splashes water onto their head and sighs like they just spoke to a god. You envy that sigh. Maybe you'll earn one like it tomorrow. You stay there for a moment longer, letting the river carry off a little dust, a little heat, maybe even a sliver of the day's weight. And then, as the sky deepens to purple and the first mosquito hums like a warning, you rise, not refreshed, but washed enough to go home. You make it home just as the last of the light slips behind the rooftops. The door creaks like it's tired too. Inside, the air is thick with the warmth of the day and the quiet rhythm of people who've already said all they needed to say. The children are asleep, sprawled like starfish across woven mats. The elders sit in the corners, blinking slowly, somewhere between meditation and complete shutdown. No one greets you, not because they don't care, because they're saving energy for tomorrow. You sit. On the table, if it can still be called that, is a familiar offering. A piece of dry barley bread, a shallow cup of lukewarm beer, and, if the gods were feeling slightly generous, half a clove of onion, sharp and fragrant and almost celebratory. You tear the bread slowly, not because you're hungry, but because this is the last small comfort of the day, and you'd rather not rush it. You chew, not mindfully, not gratefully, just steadily, like someone stretching time one bite at a time. The beer goes down in 2 swallows. You savour it, though there's not much to savour. It tastes like the inside of a warm jar, but it's yours. Someone coughs softly. Someone else shifts in their sleep. The walls creak as they cool. The night settles in, and for a brief moment, it feels enough. After dinner, you don't head straight to sleep. No one does. The body may be done, but the mind still hovers, half in the dust of the day, half looking for a place to land. So you sit with the others in the courtyard, where the air is cooler and the night finally starts making promises. And then, like every evening, he begins. The old man in the corner, the one with a limp, a stare that's seen too much, and a scar on his back that allegedly looks like Horus himself blinked and left a fingerprint. People call him the Lightning Man. They say he's survived 3 near strikes, 4 building collapses, and 5 marriages, though he claims the last one was the real miracle. He says he's lived through 3 pharaohs, but he doesn't name them. He just nods and mutters, "The loud one, the short one, the one who thought he was a god," which, admittedly, doesn't narrow it down. Tonight, like always, he tells a story. It's half whisper, half prophecy, entirely unverifiable. Once, he claims, he shouted at Ra right at noon, hands on hips, staring at the sun until his eyebrows singed. Ra apparently let him live out of confusion. Another time, he dreamt the pyramid's shadow touched the moon, and when it did, it grew teeth. No one questioned him, not seriously. You're too tired, and honestly, it's not the strangest thing you've heard this week. You don't know if any of it's true. No one does. But you sit there anyway, letting the words drift over you like river mist. Because out here, there is no scroll to read, no fire-lit drama, no celestial entertainment, just the sound of a man speaking in riddles, and the high, lazy drone of mosquitoes circling like temple priests, playing invisible flutes for the god of canals and itchy feet. Out here, stories are all we have before sleep swallows the day whole. And tonight, like always, you listen. The story ends mid-sentence, like they always do. The old man leans back against the wall. Someone snores softly. A child rolls over in their sleep. You rise slowly, carefully, and make your way to your mat. It's simple, woven straw flattened in the middle where you've lain every night for what feels like forever. You lower yourself onto it, spine first, then shoulders, then whatever's left of your thoughts. Your arm becomes your pillow. You tuck the other beneath your ribs, where the bruises are. The air is cooler now. Still dry, still dust-scented, but somehow gentler. There's the soft rhythm of breathing around you, layered like an orchestra of exhaustion. A breeze drifts through the open slats of the wall, carrying the faint whisper of river water and something that smells like onions. In the corner, you spot movement, a small rustle, maybe a rat, maybe a god in disguise. You don't care. You offer it no fear and no greeting. Just space, your eyes close slowly, not snapped shut by exhaustion, but folded down gently by routine. And for a moment, nothing hurts. Not your hands, not your shoulders, not even your heart. You sleep, knowing tomorrow you'll rise again, not to seek glory, but to move stone, one quiet breath at a time. And with that, the day ends, not in triumph, but in peace. But while the builders sleep, wrapped in straw mats, dust and the silence of routine, the rest of Egypt keeps breathing. Beyond the calloused hands and crumbling scaffolds lies another world, stranger, louder, and somehow even more complicated. A world of golden gods with animal heads, pharaohs with fragile egos, sacred cats, perfumed courtesans, and enough rules about the afterlife to make dying a full-time job. So let's leave the worksite behind for a while and wander deeper into the weird, wondrous, and occasionally absurd world of ancient Egypt. While the builders rest wrapped in dust and quiet dreams, the palace stays lit. Because somewhere far from the mud brick houses and fish-scented courtyards, another kind of Egypt stirs, one lined with polished floors, perfumed air, and the shimmering presence of the divine, or at least someone who insists he is. The pharaoh, not a king in the ordinary sense, a living god, son of Ra, heir of Osiris, chosen companion of Horus, and on paper, chief executive officer of eternity itself. He doesn't just rule, he radiates. The sun moves because he wakes up. The flood comes because he nods. At least, that's what the temple hymns say. In reality, he still sneezes, still gets stomach aches from undercooked duck, still has to sit awkwardly, while priests argue about which constellation his foot aligns with today. The divine image is meticulously maintained, but the man behind it, he's surrounded by advisors, fanned by servants, and probably stressed out because someone forgot to polish the cobra on his crown. People bow, people chant, people compose poetry about his eyelids. But behind closed doors, the palace staff mutter things like, "Here comes the man in gold eyeliner again, ordering the Nile around like it's a waiter." And among the workers, those who actually build his tomb, raise his statues, and haul his legacy block by block, he's known, not unkindly, as the one who wears fancy skirts and never lifts anything heavier than a papyrus scroll. Because for all his power, the pharaoh is still a man in linen, playing God on borrowed time, a symbol, a figurehead, a thunderous title wrapped around a very human core. And tomorrow, he'll rise, stretch, demand tribute, and possibly get a mosquito bite anyway. Of course, being divine comes with a dress code. The pharaoh doesn't just rule in spirit, he rules in style, and nothing says "I talk to gods before breakfast" like a perfectly pleated linen tunic, woven so fine it practically glows under temple light. No wrinkles, no dust, probably never touched by mortal fingers. On his head, A crown shaped like a cobra, coiled and poised, just in case anyone forgot who's in charge. Sometimes it's red, sometimes white, sometimes both, because when you've unified Upper and Lower Egypt, you get to layer your power. And on his feet, sandals so finely crafted, so delicately stitched, that rumour has it one pair costs more than a month's wages for the entire tomb crew. But who's counting? And then there's the cosmetics. Eyeliner wasn't optional, it was sacred war paint. Thick, dark coal drawn with surgical precision, not just to please the gods, but to intimidate foreign ambassadors and conceal the bags under royal eyes. Lip colour? A crushed concoction of beetle shells and pomegranate rind. Perfume? Distilled lotus, myrrh, and occasionally something harvested by moonlight that probably made the servants dizzy. You don't just smell like power, you smell like divine PR, and at the centre of this fragrant, sparkling empire of self-care is the donkey milk bath. Yes, daily, if he could help it. Warm, foamy, poured by hand, said to purify not only the flesh but the royal aura. If you were that powerful, you'd insist on daily donkey milk baths too. It wasn't just indulgence, it was image maintenance. The pharaoh didn't have Instagram. He had priests, sculptors, and a very strict skincare regime. Because gods might not age, but a bad statue lasts forever. And naturally, when you dress like a god, you have to be treated like one. Not just admired, performed around. In the royal court, protocol wasn't etiquette, it was survival. Every bow had an angle, every word had a version, depending on the direction of the Nile and the position of the moon. Calling the pharaoh lord was too vague. Son of Ra was acceptable. But forget to include, may he live, prosper, and be in good eyeliner. And suddenly you were on poultry inventory duty in the outer delta. Say the wrong word, and you might lose your job. Say it loudly, and you might lose your head. No one addressed the pharaoh directly. Ever. Even high-ranking officials had to go through layers of whisperers, ceremonial interpreters, and a high priest who once claimed his only language was divine sighing. Sometimes the message would pass through 3 scribes, 2 advisors, and a royal peacock trained to squawk at the appropriate moment of reverence. Because nothing says power like avian punctuation. Even in sleep, the pharaoh didn't escape formality. He had a fan-bearer, not to cool him, but to waft dreams toward the gods, just in case they were listening. A second servant stood nearby to record his breathing rhythms, while a third was allegedly trained to decode symbolic foot twitches. If he muttered in his sleep, someone noted it. If he rolled over, someone consulted the star charts. This wasn't rest, this was nocturnal statecraft. Because when your title includes both High Priest of every temple and walking incarnation of divine light, even your naps are a matter of national security. And when he wasn't being fanned in his sleep, or addressed through a small choir of official whisperers, the pharaoh still had a kingdom to manage, starting with his own family tree, which often looked more like a very ambitious vine. In the royal court, marriage was less about love and more about bloodline logistics. To preserve divine essence, it was entirely acceptable, encouraged even, for a pharaoh to marry his sister, his half-sister, or in particularly dedicated genealogical spirals, his niece. Occasionally, a pharaoh might marry his daughter, though to be fair, sometimes only symbolically. Other times, less symbolically. Because what's the point of being divine if your family line doesn't loop like a sacred Ouroboros? Mornings in the royal household began with careful ritual and cat selection. Yes, cats, dozens of them. The palace grounds were full of royal felines, all sleek, smug, and more respected than most high officials. Every dawn, the pharaoh would choose a lucky cat of the day, believed to bring favour, intuition, and a low risk of crocodile incidents. The chosen cat received a perfumed rub-down, a gold-threaded ribbon, and possibly better breakfast than the royal children. Speaking of which, royal children weren't raised, they were curated. Their education began early, covering essentials like sacred geometry, poetry as diplomacy, interpreting bird omens, and most importantly, mastering the expression known as serene yet commanding. This involved standing still for long periods, hands posed just so, while looking like you might smite someone, but gently. By the time they were 10, most royal offspring could recite 5 creation myths, bow at 14 angles, and stare straight through a visiting dignitary's soul. Because in the house of Pharaoh, you weren't just born into royalty, you were trained, polished, perfumed, and poised like a statue that occasionally blinked. And when the royal children weren't practicing their serene yet commanding gaze, their father, the Pharaoh, was doing something much heavier, thinking about his tomb, which in fairness he'd been doing since the day he took the throne. Because when you're a living god, ruling from a golden chair under a roof of stars, you don't just plan for death, you pre-produce it. Every corridor, every chamber, every relief carving of you offering figs to Anubis under moonlight had to be ready for eternity. The pressure wasn't just spiritual, it was architectural. What if the afterlife had paperwork? What if Osiris judged tomb layout? What if someone left out your sun god title and eternity gave you only 3 out of 5 stars on your divine performance review? Service adequate, linen clean, but tomb symmetry questionable. And so the pharaoh spent his entire reign not only commanding armies and issuing divine proclamations, but also checking floor plans, approving wall murals, arguing about whether his left profile looked more celestial. The irony? The more powerful the pharaoh, the more anxious he became. Because the bigger the ego, the harder it is to let go, especially when you believe your soul might have to navigate 12 gates, 4 crocodile-headed demons, and a riddle about farming just to reach paradise. So the tomb grew, and somewhere, under the weight of all that stone ritual and gold-plated legacy, was a man, sitting quietly, wearing eyeliner, wondering if anyone would remember his name in 3,000 years. He ruled the Nile, commanded armies, was worshipped as divine, and still needed eyeliner and a really, really big tomb. Because pharaohs weren't just rulers, they were men afraid of being forgotten, with better architecture. And while the pharaoh spent his life building a tomb big enough to impress the afterlife itself was complicated. Because in ancient Egypt, death wasn't the end. It was the beginning of paperwork, administered by 1,000 gods, all with strong opinions, animal heads, and no clear consensus. Let's step into the world of faith, where everything meant something, and sometimes that something was just a mildly sacred onion. Welcome to Egyptian religion, 1,000 gods and 0 consistency. Because once the tomb was finished, and the gold polished, and the pharaoh respectfully wrapped in several layers of expensive linen, he still had to face the gods. And in ancient Egypt, that didn't mean a god, it meant a committee. Egyptian religion wasn't a tidy system. It was a cosmic office party where everyone showed up in costume and no one agreed on the agenda. More than 1,500 gods have been recorded, though scholars suspect that's just the short list. Some were region-specific, some job-specific, and a few were probably created on the spot to explain why the grain shipment never arrived. Each deity was a specialist in their field. A god for childbirth, another for monitoring shadows during thunderstorms, one for smell-related prayers, and possibly another for goose wrangling because someone had to. There were gods who handled digestion, and entirely separate ones responsible for hiccups. If you think one god is complicated, try having one for digestion and a separate one for hiccups. It wasn't about hierarchy, it was about coverage. Egyptian religion didn't try to streamline the divine. It multiplied it, until the entire cosmos had a name, a shrine, and occasionally an animal head. And yet somehow it worked. Because in a world of flood cycles, desert winds, and unpredictable pharaoh moods, you wanted all the divine help you could get, even if it came from a jackal-headed bureaucrat who only worked Tuesdays. And if the sheer number of gods didn't keep you guessing, their appearances certainly did. Because in ancient Egypt, divinity didn't wear robes and halos. Divinity wore hawk heads, crocodile snouts, and the occasional scarab shell all perched confidently atop otherwise very human bodies. It wasn't weird, it was symbolism. A god with a falcon's head, that's Horus, sky god, royal protector, occasional moon enthusiast. A jackal-headed deity, that's Anubis, guardian of tombs, professional embalmer, probably smelled faintly of resin and judgment. Crocodile face, that'd be Sobek, god of strength, war, and reasons to avoid riverbanks. There were cat-headed goddesses, frog-faced fertility spirits, and at least one extremely dignified beetle, Khepri, the scarab-headed god of sunrise and existential recycling. To modern eyes, it looks like a very sacred masquerade party, but to the Egyptians it made perfect sense. Animals embodied divine qualities, sharp-eyed hawks, unyielding bulls, regal felines, and, yes, dung beetles, who at least understood the importance of rolling things uphill. And then there were the duplicates. Some gods existed in multiple forms across different nomes, regional districts, each with slightly altered personalities, new names, and perhaps a small change in head shape. Same function, different branding, the divine equivalent of franchising. Gods could be born, reborn, split in two, merge back together, fall in love, marry each other, and, in one festival myth, get into a screaming match over a bunch of sacred onions. Yes, onions, because even deities get dramatic when the pantry runs low. And just when you think you're starting to understand the pantheon, who's who, which head goes on what body, Egyptian religion throws one more curveball. The divine was edible. Sometimes. Take cats, for example, absolute icons. Living vessels of grace, guardians of home and spirit, and generally treated with more reverence than some junior priests. To harm a cat, even by accident, was not just taboo, it was a fast track to execution. Cats were pampered, perfumed, and mummified with more care than certain distant relatives. But then, there's fish. Fish were complicated. They appeared in religious offerings. They were painted swimming beside sacred barges. They were praised in hymns for their connection to fertility and the afterlife. And then, they were fried and eaten with garlic. Because yes, you could both worship the fish and eat it, sometimes in the same afternoon. You never quite knew if something was sacred or just slightly overcooked. Then there's the onion, possibly the most confusing vegetable in recorded theology. In some rituals, onions were used to ward off evil spirits, stuffed into tombs, tied around necks, or held under the nose of the deceased to keep the soul grounded. But in other regions, they were strictly forbidden in temples. Too strong, too vulgar, too teary. Same onion, different verdict, possibly the result of divine culinary differences between Upper and Lower Egypt. And let's not forget beer. Beer wasn't just a beverage, it was a holy multi-tool, used in daily rituals, offered to gods, applied as medicine, and consumed as breakfast. For many labourers, the day began not with prayer, but with a jug of half-fermented barley and a crumb of bread. Sacred hydration, served warm. Because in Egypt, the line between altar and appetizer was not just blurry, it was enthusiastically ignored. And if the edible theology didn't wear you out, the logistics definitely would. Because in ancient Egypt, worship wasn't just a matter of belief, it was a full-time administrative burden. Every ritual, no matter how small, had rules. It had to be performed at exactly the right hour, using exactly the right words, facing exactly the right direction, with precisely the correct incense, preferably lit at an angle that pleased the west wind. Get it wrong? You didn't just offend a god, you risked drought, disease, or eternal judgment, and possibly some very pointed side-eye from the temple staff. The priesthood ran like a divine HR department. There were schedules, rotations, backup gods in case the main one was busy that day or between incarnations. Some gods had very niche assignments. There was one for public latrines, and another for protecting the wrists of dancers during ceremonial performances. Yes, just the wrists, not the elbows. Those were someone else's jurisdiction. And death? Death was a bureaucratic relay race. When someone died, they didn't just meet Anubis and move on. They faced a whole team, one god to guide them into the underworld, one to weigh their heart, another to calibrate the scale, a fourth to interpret the results, and a fifth to glare meaningfully during the verdict. Somewhere in there, a fairy god would row them across the river of souls, and another would check if they'd filed the correct papyrus request for eternal renewal. You could almost hear the divine clerk mutter, "Sorry, you checked the wrong box. This application is for fields of reeds, not celestial garden. Next." Because if life in ancient Egypt was complicated, death was a multi-layered audit, with feathers, jackals, and moral paperwork. And yet, despite the clutter, the contradictions, and the occasional crocodile-headed paperwork clerk, it all worked. Because for the average Egyptian, this divine patchwork wasn't confusing. It was comforting. Where modern belief systems aim for clarity, ancient Egyptian religion offered something else: coverage. No matter what you did, sweeping a floor, sailing a boat, naming your cat, or sneezing too loudly in a temple courtyard, someone in the heavens was watching, and probably had a minor shrine dedicated to the matter. This sprawling theology created a world where every action felt meaningful, where even washing your hands or planting onions might ripple through the cosmos, impressing or irritating some falcon-headed auditor in the sky. There was no such thing as ordinary. You weren't just making bread. You were performing a ritual to sustain Mart, the balance of the universe. You weren't just putting out a food scrap for your cat. You were honouring Bastet, who might in turn tell Ra you've been behaving nicely. It didn't always make sense, but it made everything feel sacred, even if that sacred thing was just breakfast. Even the absurd had a place. There are temple inscriptions of gods shaped like hippos, beetles, or sharks in ceremonial hats, doing things that defy anatomy and common sense. One even appears to be grading scrolls, like a divine schoolmaster with strong opinions on grammar. But that was the point. It didn't have to be clean, it just had to be everywhere. Because when the divine is woven into every crack of your day, from waking to working to wondering what that noise was behind the granary, you never feel alone. You feel watched, connected, and, in a strange way, understood. Because in a world where even breakfast had cosmic significance, death, of course, couldn't just be the end. No, death was a process, a ceremony, a full-time production that involved salt, linen, sacred oils, recited spells, and a surprising number of people with very steady hands. Being dead was only the beginning, a very expensive embalming. Let's step now into the afterlife assembly line, where your soul took a journey, your body got reorganized, and your tomb came with fine print. Welcome to death, mummification, and other ways to end the day. Death is just phase one. Because when the gods are watching your breakfast, you can be sure they're watching your exit strategy too. In ancient Egypt, death wasn't a finish line. It wasn't a curtain call. It was a transition, a change of location, not a loss of status, a deeply sacred administrative shuffle. The soul didn't disappear, it reassigned. And like any serious relocation, it came with rituals, fees, paperwork, and a long list of potential complications. To die well in Egypt was not just an aspiration, it was an engineering project. Because what mattered most wasn't how you died, but what happened to your body afterward. No embalming, no eternity, no second chance, no forwarding address in the afterlife. That was the real fear. Not jackal demons or fire pits, but poor mummification. If your body wasn't properly cleaned, salted, dried, wrapped, enchanted, perfumed, documented, and ideally blessed by at least 4 specialists, then you were in danger. A bad afterlife wasn't about punishment. It was about paperwork rejected by the gods. You might be stuck in limbo, or misfiled into the wrong realm, or worse, forgotten. And being forgotten, that was death's true death. So long before the final breath preparations began, your family hired embalmers, priests, dream interpreters. You set aside linen. You picked your canopic jar design. Some people even drafted their own tomb scenes, just to be sure they looked more generous than they really were. Because in Egypt, death wasn't about endings, it was about presentation. Embalming, the deluxe package. Because if death was a transition, then embalming was how you packed for the trip. And let's be clear, the ancient Egyptians didn't treat mummification like a formality. They treated it like an art, a science, and a divine customer service experience, with very sharp tools. It began with the brain, which, in the opinion of most priests, was unnecessary baggage, so it had to go, not through the back of the skull, too invasive, and not with a clean slice, too indecent. Number. They inserted a long curved hook up through the nostril, scrambled the brain into a kind of sacred smoothie, and then poured it out like overcooked soup. Delicate, refined, possibly performed to flute music. Next came the organs, the liver, lungs, stomach, intestines, each one carefully removed and stored in canopic jars with lids shaped like charming little gods. A falcon, a baboon, a jackal, and a man who always looked slightly surprised to be included. The heart, that was important. It was the seat of your soul, and it would be weighed later in the afterlife. So naturally, it was left in the body. Unless the embalmer forgot. Which happened. In which case someone would carve a backup on the tomb wall and hope no one noticed. Once emptied, the body was placed in a bath of natron, a kind of magical baking soda meets spiritual desiccant, for 40 days, give or take a sandstorm. This pulled all moisture from the body, all the bad smells, and presumably all the sins hiding in your spleen. The result? A dry, slightly shriveled but eternally shelf-stable version of you, ready for step 3, wrapping. This wasn't just a matter of throwing a sheet over you and calling it sacred. It meant layer upon layer of fine linen, each tucked, tied, and sealed with resin, amulets, and sometimes, adorably, handwritten notes asking the gods to go easy on you in the next phase. They tucked bua, amulets, between your toes. They slipped charms under your tongue. They even placed small golden eyes over your eyelids, just in case you needed to see clearly in the darkness of eternity. It was less of a funeral and more of a very ambitious packing job. By the end, you were no longer just a person. You were a sacred package, a carefully bundled soul in progress, wrapped, labelled and spiritually bubble-wrapped for delivery to the field of reeds. Because in ancient Egypt, the real journey began after the receipts were stamped and the body was airtight. Once your body had been cleaned, salted, stuffed, dried, scented, and bundled like a spiritual fruit cake, the real journey began. Because mummification was just baggage claim, what came next was the flight, through Duat, the Egyptian underworld, a place not of eternal rest but of tests, trials, puzzles, and an alarmingly large number of guard stations. You didn't wander blindly, you came prepared, with a map, a set of instructions, and enough magical passwords to rival a suspiciously long Wi-Fi key. This sacred bundle of wisdom was called the Book of the Dead, though a better title might be So You've Died, Now What? It contained hymns, spells, secret names of the gatekeepers, ritual scripts for self-defense, and in some cases even diagrams of the afterlife's layout, annotated in cursive hieroglyphs. You needed to speak correctly at each checkpoint, declare your innocence, prove you hadn't lied, cheated, stolen bread, or insulted sacred geese. And after all the spells, passwords, gatekeepers, crocodile-headed gate demons, and sudden lakes of fire, you still had one final test. Because no matter how prepared your soul was, your heart still had to be weighed. This wasn't poetic metaphor. This was logistical theology, and maybe the most high-stakes weigh-in in human history. At the centre of the Hall of Two Truths, your heart was placed gently, hopefully, on one side of a massive golden scale. On the other side, a single white feather. Not just any feather, of course. This was the feather of Mart, goddess of justice, truth, and universal balance, a cosmic paperweight charged with determining your eternal fate. If your heart was lighter than the feather, you passed. You were pure, or at least pure enough. You earned a place in the field of reeds, an idealized, eternal Egypt, filled with sunlight, music, and fully functioning irrigation. But if your heart was heavier than the feather, full of guilt, lies, bad intentions, or too many thoughts about someone else's donkey, you failed. And failure in this case didn't mean detention or reincarnation. It meant being immediately consumed by Amit, the devourer, a creature with the head of a crocodile, the front of a lion, and the rear of a hippo, nature's most unsubtle way of saying, you messed up. Once eaten, your soul ceased to exist. No heaven, no hell, just deletion. But don't worry, you weren't completely alone in the process. Enter the funeral priests, clutching scrolls and clearing their throats dramatically. They came prepared to read aloud your Declaration of Innocence, a list of 42 very specific sins you absolutely, totally didn't commit. Out loud, in front of the gods, with emphasis. I have not lied, I have not stolen, I have not killed, I have not spoken ill of sacred ducks, I have not hoarded grain, I have not insulted Ra's fashion choices. Were all of them true? Well, that depended on who paid for the ceremony, because yes, even in the afterlife, a little economic encouragement could go a long way. Turns out you could take it with you, if you tipped the right priest. With enough donations, your name could be sung more sweetly, your heart could be interpreted more generously, and your sins could be gently, tactfully, glossed over. Because when it came to the weighing of the heart, truth was sacred, but presentation was everything. Tombs, your real resume. Of course, long before your heart reached the scale, you'd already been trying to make a good impression. Not just on the gods, on everyone. Because in ancient Egypt, a tomb wasn't just a final resting place. It was your portfolio for the afterlife, your resume carved in stone, your eternal LinkedIn profile, carefully curated for divine review. Walls were adorned with scenes of generosity, you giving bread to the hungry, pouring water for the thirsty, offering lotus blossoms with a perfectly symmetrical smile. Even if you hadn't done all those things, well, the artist could fill in the gaps. Text panels listed your titles. Not just scribe or merchant, but beloved of the gods, friend of the truth, and sometimes even he who brings order to the towel storage. You weren't just a farmer, you were CEO of righteous agricultural harmony. And then there were the extras. Some tombs featured fake doors, carved into the walls to trick thieves or let the soul walk freely between worlds. Others included do not disturb curses, inscribed like ancient cease and desist letters, warning intruders of divine retribution or eternal itching. There were even trap rooms, false corridors, and decoy sarcophagi, just in case someone decided your eternity should be shared. It was part security, part theatre, but mostly PR. Because the bigger and more beautiful your tomb, the more likely people were to remember you, and the gods were to notice. But with that visibility came risk. A lavish tomb didn't just say, eternal peace, it also said, loot me. And so, over the centuries, many tombs were raided, not just by thieves but by jealous rivals, grave diggers, and the occasional archaeologist with very creative ethics. Still, the message was clear. You built your afterlife by how well you performed in life, and how well you looked doing it in stone. Being dead is exhausting. Because after all that chiseling, staging, praying, rapping, salting, and spell reciting, you'd think a person could finally rest. But no. In ancient Egypt, being dead wasn't a break. It was a career shift. You didn't retire. You relocated to a realm full of gates, gods, riddles, paperwork, and the constant risk of being cosmically eaten if your spiritual resume didn't pass inspection. Death was just the next assignment, one that required flawless embalming, top-tier tomb decor, multiple amulets, and preferably a cousin who worked in temple administration. Death wasn't rest, it was just the next round of responsibilities, only quieter and wrapped in a lot more linen. There were no shortcuts, no casual cremation, no poetic ashes to ashes, just 40 days of salt soak, scrolls of chanting, a weighing ceremony with zero margin for error, and a decorative door leading nowhere, but looking fantastic. And don't forget the budget. A proper burial meant hiring embalmers, painters, priests, tomb architects, livestock sacrificers, and someone to explain to your mother why you chose to be buried with 27 jars of pickled onions. For the ancient Egyptians, death was serious, expensive, and had more steps than applying for permanent residency. And yet for all the complexity, for all the drama and divinity, it all came down to one quietly terrifying question. Was your heart light enough to be remembered? Not just pass the test, not just avoid the devourer, but be truly remembered. By gods, by family, by stone, etched into something more permanent than flesh. Because for the ancient Egyptians, the ultimate fear wasn't damnation, it was irrelevance. Being dead was only the beginning of very expensive embalming. But while pharaohs obsessed over tomb walls and priests debated the purity of your embalming linen, there was another story, quietly unfolding back among the living. One you might not expect in a civilization so famously fond of hierarchy and eyeliner. Let's talk about women in ancient Egypt. Because unlike many ancient cultures, looking at you, classical Greece, Egyptian women could own land, run businesses, sign contracts, get divorced, and if needed, throw a sandal at their husbands with legal impunity. Women in ancient Egypt. More rights than you'd expect. When you think of women in the ancient world, you probably imagine veils, silence, and long corridors filled with men arguing about politics, while women were told to wait quietly near a loom. And to be fair, that was true in many places, but not in ancient Egypt. Because long before anyone in Athens had figured out democracy or Roman senators learned to backstab each other in Latin, Egyptian women were signing contracts, filing lawsuits, and, if necessary, reclaiming goats after divorce. Let's start with the basics. Egyptian women had legal personhood. That is, they could own property, sue and be sued, inherit land, and run businesses, all under their own name, not through a male proxy. In Greece, a woman couldn't enter a courtroom without a male guardian. In Egypt, she might be the judge. And this wasn't limited to the elite. Even middle and lower class women had access to basic economic rights. There are surviving documents that show women leasing grain silos, lending silver with interest, and filing formal complaints against lazy husbands who kept skipping work duty at the temple. Real complaint, documented in ink, signed and sealed. It gets better. Marriage in Egypt was a personal and practical affair. No priest needed, no grand ceremony. Mostly just a contract that said who brought what into the house and who would get the donkey if things went south. And when things did go south, Egyptian women could initiate divorce. No legal gymnastics required. If the marriage failed, the wife could reclaim her personal property, including livestock, jewellery, and occasionally that one nice linen tunic he never gave back. And while we're on the topic, Egyptian women were known to have remarkable domestic authority. They could run the household, manage finances, raise children, hire help, fire help, and, according to one letter, forbid her husband from drinking beer near the clay jars. A line that echoes across time with suspicious familiarity. And yes, if all else failed, she could throw a sandal. Diplomacy, domestic addition. But it wasn't just in law and daily life that Egyptian women had presence. They were woven deeply into myth and religion. Goddesses weren't side characters. They were forces of nature. Isis was the mother of magic, protector of the throne, and full-time fixer of Osiris-related disasters. Hathor ruled over love, music, joy, and drunken festivals, sometimes all in the same evening. Sekhmet, lion-headed and permanently irritable, handled war, plague, and dramatic exits. Even royal power was not entirely off limits. Hatshepsut, one of Egypt's greatest rulers, wore the false beard of the pharaoh, commanded vast trade expeditions, built monuments still standing today, and endured later attempts by insecure successors to erase her from history. They tried, they failed. Stone has a good memory. But even outside the palace walls, women held quiet influence. Many ran family businesses, textiles, beer brewing, perfume production. They trained daughters, passed on property, mediated disputes, and showed up in tomb art as equals, not just decorative companions. That said, let's not romanticize. This was still a patriarchal society. Women were not political equals, and male dominance was written into law in ways both subtle and overt. But for their time, their region, and their era, Egyptian women were outliers with scrolls and contracts, and when needed, really good aim with a sandal. She may not have ruled the world, but she could rule the farm, the finances, and the front room. And sometimes that was more than enough. And while Egyptian women could manage estates, sue their husbands, and single-handedly out-negotiate grain merchants, there was still one thing they, like everyone else, had no real defense against: illness, because when it came to medicine in ancient Egypt, things got creative. If you had a headache, a cough, or a suspicious rash shaped like a fish, you didn't just see a doctor, you saw a priest-physician armed with goat fat, clay, and 3 spells about bees. Let's step now into the ancient clinic, where magic met medicine, and survival depended on timing, herbs, and whether your household cat had been recently appeased. Welcome to Medicine, Magic Meets Goat Fat, where diagnosis meets divination. Of course, rites and rituals only went so far, because eventually, someone in ancient Egypt got sick. And when they did, they didn't head to the local clinic with a waiting room and a clipboard. They went to a priest, or more precisely, to a seduanadzabu, a healer who was part doctor, part magician, part bureaucrat of the divine. You didn't just receive a diagnosis, you received a ritual. The ancient Egyptian medical encounter was a hybrid event, part biology, part theology, part experimental poetry, involving goat fat and garlic. Your practitioner may have studied the human body, seen injuries on the battlefield, recorded symptoms with surprising detail, but he also memorized incantations, offered prayers to Thoth, god of wisdom, and possibly asked how recently you'd angered a cat. Because healing wasn't just about the body, it was about restoring balance with the universe. If something hurt, it meant something had shifted, spiritually, cosmically, or just in your left lung. Treatments were rarely subtle. A sore throat might be met with a poultice of natron, crushed dates, and a verse spoken 3 times under a sycamore tree. Digestive issues? Try clay, coriander, and a whispered apology to the Nile. Fever? Got a cold? Offer a cat, smear some tree resin, pray to Thoth. If you're still alive, come back for a follow-up. The healer would also check omens, recite charms, and possibly consult a scroll whose last few lines had been smudged by incense. Was it scientific? In part. Was it sacred theatre? Also yes. And like all good theatre, it came with risk, repetition, and an audience that really hoped for a happy ending. Of course, once the priest-physician had diagnosed you, perhaps via pulse, pupil, or pigeon behaviour, it was time for a treatment plan. And ancient Egyptian prescriptions were nothing if not creative. You might be sent home with instructions to rub donkey fat on your chest, or smear fish blood mixed with honey across your joints, or apply fig tree resin to your scalp while reciting the 17th line of a hymn you probably forgot. Some poultices included goose fat, crushed dates, and bits of cooked onion, wrapped in linen and applied at a lunar-aligned angle, if the symptoms were internal. You drank. Mixtures might include clay, natron, beer, and something charitably labelled herbal sediment. It didn't always taste good. It didn't always go down smoothly. But it was ancient medicine, and side effects were more spiritual than scientific. For wounds, one remedy involved sprinkling powdered betel onto the injury, either for antiseptic purposes or to frighten the bacteria with something worse. Because when it came to curing illness, gross and effective often shook hands. Underlying all of this was a worldview where the body was not just a machine, it was a sacred vessel, full of divine energy and invisible forces. If your stomach hurt, it wasn't indigestion. It might be a ghost fish that swam into your liver during a ritual gone wrong. If your eyes watered too much, perhaps a jealous spirit had tied karmic knots in your tear ducts. So treatments weren't just physical, they were about persuasion, convincing your body and the universe that harmony should return now. Please and thank you. Did all of this work? Sometimes. And sometimes the real cure was time, rest, and the fear of having to drink another mug of clay and beer soup. Fortunately, or alarmingly, the Egyptians wrote it all down. And today, much of what we know about ancient medicine comes from scrolls that survived sand, time, and at least one suspiciously hungry goat. The most famous are the Ebers Papyrus and the Edwin Smith Papyrus, documents that sound like they belong in a university library, but which once lived in temple archives alongside incense and crocodile teeth. These papyri recorded hundreds of medical recipes, ranging from practical to poetic to "please don't try this at home." Some were surprisingly effective. Honey, for example, was used to clean wounds and prevent infection, a treatment modern medicine still applauds. Aloe and castor oil made regular appearances, as did pomegranate juice, which may have had antiparasitic properties. And then there were the others. One fertility treatment advised placing a piece of yeast-risen bread near the womb, then waiting for a divine sign. No one specified what kind of sign, possibly steam, possibly a celestial thumbs up. Another remedy for nightmares involved chanting the name of a moon god backward while rubbing goose grease behind your ears, which honestly might work just from the effort involved. But the logic was clear. The body wasn't separate from the soul. It wasn't a mechanical object to be fixed with tools alone. Ailments were often seen as spiritual misalignments, curses, guilt, ghosts, a misfired prayer, and healing meant realigning yourself with divine order, physically, mentally, cosmically. So the papyri weren't just instruction manuals, they were cosmic user guides, equal parts medical reference, magical incantation, and philosophical reassurance. And if that sounds chaotic, it was. But to the Egyptians, it was also complete, because health wasn't just about pain going away, it was about being back in harmony with the universe, one crushed beetle and whispered prayer at a time. And if you thought all healers were generalists with a scroll and a goat-fat salve, think again. Ancient Egypt had medical specialization. There were doctors just for the eyes, others focused solely on teeth, or internal organs, or, believe it or not, toes injured during pyramid construction. Yes, that last one is recorded. Apparently, if a 2-ton limestone block grazed your foot, as they do, you could see a toe trauma expert. Not a glamorous title, but highly in demand. And these specialists didn't just chant. They cut, stitched, and cauterized. Egyptian surgeons were known to sew up wounds with linen thread, lance abscesses, and use red-hot blades to burn away infected tissue, all done with remarkable precision and absolutely no anesthesia. There were no poppy derivatives, no sleepy elixirs, no counting backward from 10, just faith, bravery, and a bit of sacred sedge grass to chew on, possibly as a placebo, possibly to give you something to bite when the knife touched bone. Because when the scalpel came out, you hoped the priest was fast and your vision blurry. Still, for all the limitations, some procedures were shockingly advanced. Skull fractures were treated with care. Wound care was organised. And the idea of infection, while not fully understood, was taken seriously enough that tools were often washed in natron before reuse. In a way, it was surgery by intuition and divine guidance, where every cut was a prayer and every patient a test of cosmic patience, and the fact that some of them survived? Frankly, miraculous. But then again, in Egypt, medicine wasn't just about survival, it was about restoring harmony, one stitched toe at a time. Did it work? Sometimes. So after all the chanting, salves, scarab dust poultices, and toe-specific procedures, you might reasonably ask, did any of this actually work? Surprisingly, yes. Sometimes. Not everything, of course. A prayer to Thoth probably didn't kill bacteria, but honey did. Egyptians used it liberally on wounds, and modern science now confirms. Honey has antimicrobial properties. Same with aloe vera, willow bark, coriander, and a long list of herbs the ancients ground into pastes and applied with great confidence and often great flair. They knew that cleanliness mattered, even if they didn't have the word germ. They knew that some plants soothed and that some wounds needed time, not scorpions. But for every treatment grounded in proto-science, there was one that leaned heavily on faith. Burying a lock of hair under the floor to cure migraines. Drinking mashed crocodile tail for fertility. Drawing protective eyes on your feet to confuse the illness. Because in the end, Egyptian medicine was as much belief system as it was body care. People didn't just want to stop coughing, they wanted to restore balance between themselves and the gods, the stars, the Nile, the unseen forces that tugged on health like threads in a vast cosmic tapestry. Medicine wasn't about erasing symptoms, it was about restoring cosmic alignment with goat fat and a good chant. And maybe that was the most important ingredient of all. Because when you believe the universe is always watching, then healing isn't just physical, it's relational. You weren't just sick, you were out of tune. And your healer, part doctor, part priest, wasn't just treating your body, he was tuning your soul with nature on intention and maybe a bit of hope, because once your soul was aligned, your symptoms soothed, and your goose fat ointment had finally dried, you still had to get dressed. And in ancient Egypt, fashion wasn't just functional, it was ritual, status symbol, sun protection strategy, and bold stylistic choice, made in 42 degrees Celsius heat. Let's take a closer look at what people wore, from sheer linen robes and heavy black eyeliner to the bold decision to forego underwear entirely. Welcome to Egyptian fashion. Linen, eyeliner and sunstroke. After the afterlife, the embalming and the goat fat medicine, it's time we talked about something more visual. Because in ancient Egypt, you didn't need to die to make a statement. You could just get dressed. And what a statement it was. Let's begin with the foundation of every outfit, rich or poor. Linen. Not cotton, not wool, not even silk. Linen. Always linen. Woven from the flax plant and bleached by the sun, it was light, breathable, and gloriously impractical in wind. Egyptians wore linen the way modern influencers wear filters, liberally, creatively, and sometimes almost invisibly. The hotter the day, and it was always a hot day, the thinner the weave. Some garments were so sheer, they whispered more than they spoke. But no one minded. There were no modesty laws carved in stone, and no underwear to complicate matters. Men typically wore a kilt like shendit, wrapped at the waist and sometimes pleated, if you were feeling fancy. Women wore straight-cut dresses with straps over the shoulders, cinched under the bust or not at all. Servants and farmers often wore very little, or just a loincloth, not out of rebellion, but necessity. When it's 42 degrees Celsius in the shade and you're hauling water from the Nile, extra fabric is the enemy. Egyptian style was less about covering the body and more about surviving the sun in dignity. But linen was only the beginning, because no true Egyptian look was complete without a generous application of eyeliner. Kohl was everywhere. Men, women, children, even statues, all wore it proudly, painted in thick black or green lines that extended past the corners of the eyes in bold divine swoops. Why? To look fierce, to keep dust out, to protect against the glare of the sun. And of course, to ward off evil spirits, because there's nothing like a smoky eye to frighten a demon. This wasn't vanity. This was practical magic, applied daily with confidence, and a small stick dipped in mineral powder. Move over. Modern makeup tutorials. Egyptian kohl had function and fierceness. Hair, however, was a different matter. Many Egyptians, especially in the upper classes, shaved their heads, not just for cleanliness, but as a fashion base layer. On top of that came wigs. Not little curls or half-hearted buns, full sculptural, sometimes architectural creations made of human hair, wool, or palm fibre. Braided, beaded, perfumed. Wigs were so central to style that they were often more dressed than the wearer. And atop the wig, you might wear a perfume cone, a waxy blob infused with fragrant oils, perched directly on your scalp and designed to melt slowly in the heat, releasing scent as the day wore on. Yes, they invented wearable, slow-release essential oils. Jewellery completed the ensemble, and completed is putting it mildly. Necklaces, earrings, bracelets, anklets, amulets, rings, belts, pectorals, headbands. If it could be adorned, it was. If it could shimmer in the sun, you wore too. Jewellery wasn't just decoration, it was status, protection, a form of identification in life and in death. A scarab ring might be a lucky charm. A lapis necklace could tell others you had connections, possibly even divine ones. Gold wasn't just pretty, it was believed to be the flesh of the gods. Even the poorest citizens wore colourful faience beads, strung together with care. Because in Egypt, fashion wasn't a luxury, it was part of existence. And yes, there were consequences. With so little fabric and so much sun, sunstroke was basically seasonal. Records mention workers fainting mid-shift, priests adjusting rituals to avoid midday collapse, people losing wigs during sandstorms, a very specific kind of bad day. But still the show went on, because to dress in ancient Egypt wasn't just to shield your body, it was to express your identity, to signal your place in the world, to align yourself with the divine and declare, I exist, I shine, I sweat with style. In the end, fashion in ancient Egypt was equal parts style, survival, and spiritual SPF. So yes, maybe your wig would melt, maybe your eyeliner would smudge, and maybe your linen would cling in all the wrong places, but you'd still be stylish in the sun, defiant in the dust, and determined to look good doing it. Which brings us to the final question. After everything you've seen, everything you've endured, from hauling blocks and dodging gods, to chanting spells and drinking clay, could you survive a day in ancient Egypt? Let's take a breath, lean back, and reflect. So, after the pulling, the sun, the fishbones, the pharaohs, the gods with falcon heads, the spells, the eyeliner, the beer for breakfast, the perfectly symmetrical tomb murals, and the aggressively opinionated cats, let's be honest, would you have survived a day in ancient Egypt? Probably not. Not the 4 a.m. wake-up call. Not the walk to the work site in heat that could fry an egg on your sandal. Not the lunch of chewy barley puck and tepid beer with extra dust for texture. Certainly not the mummification process. You'd probably tap out before breakfast was over. And that's okay, because ancient Egypt wasn't designed to be comfortable. It was designed to be immortal. And yet, despite the sunburns, the spiritual paperwork, the curse-inscribed doors, and the ghost fish allegedly swimming around in people's livers, you have to admit, they made it look good. Even the lowest labourer had a sense of style. A little eyeliner, a clean linen wrap, a quiet sense of purpose as they stacked stone upon stone in the service of something far bigger than themselves. You may have blistered, you may have fainted, but you would have done it with symmetrical eyeliner and historically excellent posture. Because Egypt wasn't just built, it was performed. Every chant, every temple step, every bead of sweat was part of a larger rhythm, a civilization that moved like a hymn through time. And it didn't move because it was easy. It moved because someone chose to pull the stone anyway. Someone showed up in the heat. Someone learned how to wrap linen tight enough for eternity. Someone sang to the gods, even when the gods were being a bit moody. Egypt wasn't great because it was soft. It was great because it was disciplined, inventive, sincere, and a little bit fabulous. They stacked stones into stars, turned dust into dynasty, and made the gods nervous. And maybe that's what endures. Not just the monuments, not just the mummies or the myths, but the spirit behind it all. The belief that life, even when hard, could be beautiful. That sweat could mean something. That pain could be dressed in gold leaf and painted into memory. And what about us? We live with thermostats, sunscreen, and antihistamines. We've swapped the temple for the traffic light, the scribe for the screen. But maybe, somewhere beneath all the modern comforts, we still carry a spark of that same yearning. To build something that outlasts us, to be seen, to be remembered, to feel, if only for a moment, like we're part of something eternal. And so now, as the wind slows and the torches dim, as your linen robe loosens and the day grows quiet, you lie back, you close your eyes, and if you listen closely, you might still hear the soft creak of a wooden sled in the sand, a voice chanting in the distance, the rustle of a cat settling nearby, the echo of a priest's whisper, and far above you, the stars. The same stars they saw, the same sky they carved into ceiling frescoes, still watching, still waiting. Because in the end, you may not survive a day in ancient Egypt, but at least you'd look incredible doing it. So now, if your blanket is warm, and your bed doesn't involve straw, sand, or the occasional sacred beetle, you're already doing better than most pyramid builders. You've walked through temples, dragged stone across sun-baked earth, bargained with gods, and survived a hypothetical mummification, all from the comfort of your pillow. The day is done. The gods are quiet. Even the cat, vigilant and smug, has curled up at your feet. You've earned your rest. Not the embalmed kind, the soft, slow kind, the kind that comes after a long story and a longer history. Let the dust settle. Let the echoes fade. Let the stars keep watch over your dreams, like they once watched over kingdoms. And if you see a falcon-headed god drifting by in your sleep, nod politely. He probably just wants to compliment your eyeliner. Sleep well, traveller. May your heart be light, your linen loose, and your dreams eternally symmetrical.